Okay, so here we are, Battle of Vitoria. This is Salamanca sort of showed that the British-Portuguese army worked. This and was a very important battle, and thus kind of, achieves a level of awareness for me that most of the battles in this particular set don't. This one kind of barely registered for me. It shows you how lacking in history I am overall, but at least when it comes to the specifics of the campaigns. But actually this turns out to be one of a series of very, very decisive battles towards the end of the campaign. Part of why the French are pulling out. And what you have is Jourdan has his forces set up, and he's got almost as many troops as the English, but he's kind of caught with his pants down here. Spread out all through hell and creation, running through here. Now, there are a bunch of options in this scenario. He had a lot more troops available to him in the general area. Basically, he's got 3 corps on the field here, and or what amount to it. They're named armies, but and one more that there's like one unit associated with that could have shown up conceivably. They historically they were a couple of days late to the battle, so it's kind of like, well, maybe they would have had them. The problem with that, so there are a bunch of what ifs, and there's a whole bunch of counters here that from both sides that are units that could have been in the area. And that's sort of like, things that happen in the CWB series, for example. They often say, well, there were a bunch of units around here. The campaign could have been different. Yeah, it could have. But if the campaign was different, you probably want to go with not this setup necessarily. And of course, there's a question: would the battle have been on this terrain? And if the French had so many more troops, would it have been fought under anywhere near these conditions? And that's where kind of the what ifs feel funky to me. But I think it's always kind of neat to give these kind of options. In this particular case, I'm going to be doing the historical scenario. This is the biggest scenario in the game. Each player has their own record sheet, which is kind of cool because I can put reinforcements on the player's sheet if that's important to me. I've also got them associated out there. Setup is better defined than in the last scenario. They still kind of go with the halfway between this town and that, but at least it's not halfway between this unit that was defined as halfway between this town and that, and you have to go look up that unit and this other thing. I found it a lot easier to set this sucker up. And we've got some special toys here, some of which may not be too important to us. Okay, but on the strategic side of things, the English are on the offensive here. And it's going to be up to them to sort of make things happen. So let's take a look at, and like I said, their reinforcements are all up there. So even though there are a lot of French on the board, the English army is going to be larger overall. Lines of communication, the French one's kind of weird. The Bayonne Road there, except, I assume this is supposed to be if an enemy unit cuts the road between the Edge and Vitoria. If that happens, the trail to Pamplona becomes the French line of communication, which is over here. Okay, that sort of makes sense, but you'll see where there's something kind of fuzzy about this in a moment. And I guess I'll just live with it. Victory points in this isn't going to be just a who broke who, although there are going to be, and I have to record them somewhere, the armies do have morale levels. It took me a while to find that in this one. But they're going to be associated about, you get points for step losses on each side. Points for leader losses, 10 points each. 50 points for Wellington, 20 points for Joseph. The French opponents of Joseph's killed. There's a treasure counter over here, which the English get, what, 10 points for? And then there's these wagons here, which is a combined the artillery park and general supplies, etc., that are worth nothing. I don't know. I'm not sure why they're in the game. We'll see if they have any real effect. It looks like they're meant to be some sort of road block and hindrance, and there are special rules to handle them. A number of different scenarios, one of which is, hey, was the Army of the North there? A couple shorter scenarios, in case you don't have time to play, you know, what's the biggest scenario in the book, in the box, probably. Just, hey, don't waste the map and the counters. You get your chance to play some of the more interesting little battles. And then a strategic deployment, which looks really interesting, especially if you're playing with something like, you know, one of these big options like the Army of the North. Essentially, the French have to set up their pieces according to a situation that gives them something similar to what you've got here, where they're spread out a little bit, but not necessarily the particular setup they've got. And in particular, these guys wouldn't have to be flung out anywhere near as far as they are. That would probably be the biggest difference here. I'm just playing with the historical. A bunch of battle options. So like these it's just a series of choices that each player gets to pick, and you get to pay up to 4 points of these. Now they're presented as tables. It'd be kind of cool if they were random events or something. But so the French table, remove the baggage train in the artillery park so they won't be cluttering up your road for a point. I don't think that's worth it. Slow down all Anglo-Allied reinforcements, all kind of stuff like that. I want to play the game as it's historically set, but some of these can be kind of interesting in extending, you know, the interest of the game. Some of them could probably be done as kind of secret picks type things that, you know, allow you to surprise the enemy with certain different setups. So, for example, even just redeploying your setup makes it harder. But delaying the Anglo-Allied reinforcements, man, you kind of got to tell them that, right? And I don't know how exciting that is compared to speeding up reinforcements. The French can destroy bridges. I don't know. A bunch of special rules here. Setup and movement restrictions. Okay, so the French aren't allowed to move until the Allies come close to their units, within 6 hexes. Or if Jourdan actually walks up to their army, which is essentially a corps commander, and has a chat with him and says, you know, you probably ought to do something. Or on turn 8. And after turn 8, all the French units are released and can do movement. Now, that's dependent on normal command and control rules. The French leaders can't move except for Jourdan. Each one is activated when Jourdan enters the hex. At the beginning of the next turn, the movement of that leader is free. Well, and then they say if they're in a radius of 6 hexes of their leader. Yeah, if you're playing with that. I guess it doesn't make much sense to play this without at least the level 2 of command and control. You could probably fudge the rules to try to appropriate it. Joseph cannot be activated by Jourdan. He is going to be considered only active on turn 8. I mean, you know, he is sort of in charge here. Okay, the French units north of the Zadora, that's the river here, can't move before turn 8 no matter what, and they can't move north of where they set up. So that becomes kind of a potential problem, except I got this barred, so I've got at least one place where I could kind of prevent a British advance from that direction from getting stupid. once a unit is able to move, it's active for the rest of the game. They suggest the level 2 of command and control for this battle. And their explanation for that is that Jordan screwed up. I'm not sure why that makes sense, that level 2. It may make it more competitive, but my feeling is that it doesn't particularly give you any advantage. And to tell you the truth, level 2 is already making you pay the big penalty, which is that some of these corps, and it took me a while to figure out, I think I had done it before, how you determine who the commander of a unit is. What it is, so for example, Gazon here has a pink line across here. He has, I guess, the pink troops. But some of the pink troops are back here, you know. Likewise, we've got some cav here, which is very definitely not pink, it's green. Green is not Riley. Delon, this command, the Army of the Midi or something like that. So, I almost feel that you wouldn't put the cav here unless it was detached to help defend that. So I kind of feel like, unlike the rules themselves don't handle attachments and detachments that I remember, and I may sort of fudge that a little bit and say that this is a detached unit, because it really doesn't make sense to have that cav up there unless it's somehow cooperating with the rest of that command. Now, it could just be that was a failed cooperation, and that's what's being tried to be represented here. And I honestly, I'll look through the discussion of the historical situation to see if just what was going on, because if there was enough conflict there, then I'll play it as the rules are, and that's essentially out of command. Not on the first turn, but it doesn't matter much for the first turn. I'm going to be playing with the command rules that I played with in the first scenario that I played, the Ocaña scenario. I don't see any reason not to. If anything, I think this series always is going to feel a little funny in terms of there not being very many commanders, because you don't have that sort of divisional level of commander. Orders go to the corps, the units have to be within the corps' command radius, and that's it. And you can't detach, you can't send, a division off on its own or whatever. So, I think this is actually as good a choice to look at as any other. Now the commands, okay, let's take a look at the treasure, the park, and the wagons. So, these units start in movable ability, in their column side face up. And then they can move only if an enemy unit arrives at 3 hexes or less. They don't have to be in command. And then they must, the treasure can freely move after this. The park and the wagons must move every turn towards their line of communication using a road, trail, or clear terrain. They cannot enter, if they get moved adjacent to, they make a morale check. And basically the crew flees if they fail the morale check. And now you've got this artillery park or set of wagons just sitting there doing nothing. Now in one case, let's see, the treasure can be stacked with combat units. It's small, and it'll retreat along with them if the unit's disorder. Due to fire, if they disorder due to melee, the treasure checks morale. If the treasure can only be captured if it's taken alone. Now, I remember the park. Yeah. When a park counter is flipped, it can fire once with a fire factor of 1 on an enemy adjacent unit. So you've been flipped over means that there is an enemy adjacent unit, and now you get some kind of defensive fire. As far as I can see, they're just a way of cluttering the map a little bit and making it a little harder to proceed with your retreat. mentioned with the victory points, I think I skipped this. A half point per French stuff exited in good order by the road to Bayonne. What that means is if the French want to withdraw units, they can do so in good order. And this is kind of the situation that I was trying to portray in the Salamanca battle was, you know, the French would want to get out of here, and I was just not counting good order units against them. Well, here it counts them against you, but not as much, which means if you manage to do a pretty good job of beating up the British, yet things look ugly, you might want to just fall back, and you might be able to get a victory that way. And because the victory points are scheduled as follows, if you get less than, if you end up with as many points as the Brits, the French get a major victory, and that's all there is to it. So that withdrawal may actually be able to get you a major victory when Brits are coming and could potentially, you know, even up the score. So I got to kind of remember that. If the Brits don't get 30 points more, it's a draw. Otherwise, the next 30 points is marginal, and then 60 points higher, well, 61 points higher, the Brits get a major victory. Okay, the British command structure is a little different. And here they give some nice rules to define what the army commander can actually do. So Wellington's allowed to command 3 units. Beresford, Hill, and Graham, any 3 units. Beresford, Hill, and Graham are marked by their commands here in terms of what units they have. And I'm hoping the colors match them as well. Some of them are divided up where a division is actually like, here you've got Hill and Graham splitting a division. So that could be kind of confusing, but the colors on the counters I think are correct. And let's see. There's a couple of Spanish units that are basically independent and they can do whatever the hell they like. And Wellington's allowed 3 orders per turn. I wrote some orders down, not here. Those are from the last battle. Over here. And I'm using sort of my CWB style of order sheets. I give an order number. I actually have this receiver column. I don't need that because that's the order number. And then a status that the order's in, and then the written out order. You know, the extra formatting to my orders is going to help me, I think, compared to just writing them down like this. I was finding I kind of desired this, and if I'm going to use a sheet of lined paper anyway, what the hell? I got to order some, though, because I no longer work at a place where I have, like, piles of paper that I take home to work on, and then I'm like, well, you know, I still got some left. Okay. What do we have here? The French command system. Jourdan is the army leader. He can give only 1 order per turn. But again, in addition to the activation rules. So I don't think Jourdan can actually command any units on his own. Joseph can only command the guard and the Josephinos and 3 units of his choice. Now, Joseph does not have, if you look, we had this with the last scenario too, Joseph doesn't have ratings. Joseph's also listed as an army commander. Over here, Joseph and Jourdan are commanders-in-chief. I think Joseph is an army commander with 0 command ability. He can't write any orders, and he commands a small force. So he's basically got his own little loose command that he can throw in where he likes. And you're not going to see any tension between Joseph and Jourdan, which probably historically existed. Okay. The river. The river can only be crossed at bridges and only in column. An attack through a bridge is like for a stream. Okay. And this leads me to all kinds of problems, but a stream doesn't seem to say anything, but I guess that's just for the effects of melee combat, is that it infantry values -1, cav values 1. Okay, that's probably what they mean, except, let's see, yeah. It says here an infantry can only, as part of that sentence, an attack through a bridge is like for a stream, and infantry can attack only in column, and cav's melee value is reduced to 1. I don't think streams required you to form column in the roles. I don't know. That doesn't sound like it was the case to me, but the limits and penalties, 3 minutes to play each column, whatever. I'm not playing with that crap. The armies here are homogeneous, and the corps and armies are pooled. So we have one demoralization level for the entire army. We're not going to break individual corps here. And there was something else I wanted to look up, which is that Kyle pointed out, I'll look this up, but Kyle pointed out to me that you can actually withdraw units. It's really cool because he's like playing this at the same time I am. He's playing opposed, but playing and learning it at the same time, and providing pictures, and we're kind of having a back and forth where each of us finds something neat. Let me go and take a peek at whether there are any other things in the orders, in the special rules. So I'm really considering the fatigue rules. I know I didn't use them before. I meant to do modular demoralization, but I did not. Of course, I haven't really had core-based demoralization in any game yet, so. But the fatigue is on a core-by-core basis. The problem is, I'd have to keep track of each leader on their own and collect up the points. But basically, each time a unit moves and melee or melees, it gets a point. It's got to be an attack and melee. Yeah, I'm gonna give this a try to play it, because I don't see where it's going to be that heavy a burden on bookkeeping. Basically, you're going to keep a number on each leader. It's either going to be under the leader, in which case it's working its way up to a real point. So every 5 fatigue points works you up to a fatigue level. Okay, and the first fatigue level drops your morale. The second morale, each one just drops your morale. So your units are going to become less and less combat effective, and they're going to want to sit and rest. And when they sit and rest, let's see, you recover a fatigue point. You could conceivably pick up 2 per turn, though, if you're marching and fighting hard. I think that's going to keep the battles from being quite so bloody. However, if both, well, no, I mean, it's only the guy who's attacking who really is expending fatigue. So, yeah. All right, I like this idea. What I was thinking was, well, if both sides get a fatigue and melee, you could see 2 lines like smashing into each other and meleeing pretty hard. The one worry that I have is that it may further dissuade and weaken me from forming up into column and trying to bust the enemy up that way. I don't feel like that's the British modus operandi, so since they're on the offensive in this battle, it should work out okay. I'll still form my little lines. My orders at the beginning, Hill is over here, and this is not all he has, is to clear the heights of Pueblo and then make an attack on Zumetsu. And then Beresford, I've given him orders to take the knoll of Arnias here, and then Hill is supposed to continue attacking into the town. The Hill of Arnias and Hill? Knoll. I spelled knoll with a G in my orders. But my intention is to do it by breaking into one unit coming across the bridge here, and then I'm going to put my artillery here to support that, and another unit, another division essentially, coming across this way. That could be a little dangerous because this guy's exposed. If the French get to move, they might be able to dislodge him if Hill's forces aren't making enough movement forward at the right time. We'll see how it works out. I've spent some time looking for any kind of rules that would allow me to back out of a hex, and I can't find them. The only cases where I can find it is if I'm in, open order where I have facing in all directions or square or something like that. So I think withdrawing, I don't know. Either I'm missing something and not able to find the little rule, or withdrawing is indeed as hard as I've been seeing. I went back and looked on the game box, and his post actually gave the rules number. One useful thing here. A rearward move without a facing change or formation change costs 1 movement point plus the normal terrain cost. Well, that's weird, but okay. And that looks like it's for any kind of unit, so it's pretty easy to withdraw facing forward. Now, here's the thing. All that does is it takes away your morale penalty for getting shot at. So you still generate a withdrawal fire, which could be quite heavy. So I'm not sure how much of an effect it would have on things, but it certainly does make it a little easier. You don't have to, it doesn't feel like a musket and pike or a 7 Years' War battle if you can give ground. So we'll play with that rule correctly this time, I hope. Well, turn 1 flew by without a lot of effort here. The the Spaniards here beginning to deploy. And the French aren't allowed to move, so there's not a whole hell of a lot I can do about them. Actually, these guys can. Wow, maybe I want to pull back. See, the thing is, what I'm facing right now isn't very big. I don't know when the rest of the army comes in. Do I want to fall back and, give them that ground for free? Or do I want to endanger myself to being cut off and unable to advance in the directions that I'd like to? And that's kind of the real question here is, do I want to save those units that are way out there, or are they serving a very good purpose? One thing I can do to help answer that question is I can look at the British reinforcements and take a look what's coming in. Turn 1, Spanish units, 2 more. Okay, those 2. I'm not going to be getting any other Spaniards for any other units under Hill for quite a while. The next reinforcements are in turn 4. So I think staying out here and hindering that advanced guard of Hill's command is well worth doing. We'll see what happens, but I'm not going to be pressed very hard. There's not, and likewise, turn 4 is when the first reinforcements come, so there's not going to be a major deployment of Brits coming in here that could maybe be used to cut me off from the French line. Meanwhile, Jordan, I've moved him using the road bonus. I think it applies to leaders. He can't quite get to any of his subordinates yet. So this is one of the first decision points to make for the French is, what do you want to activate? Do you want to activate the guys who are up here who are probably going to get hit and going to be activated anyway? I want to pull this back. Like I said, that's I'm making that semi-attached. Just because, at the very least, I have the countercharge ability no matter what. So maybe semi-attached is good enough. Or maybe just playing by the rules is good enough because it's providing some defensive support to the French line up there. So, you know, I could have taken a turn and gone over here and gotten these units into command fairly soon. I wouldn't have been able to reach the actual commander because I wouldn't get the road bonus for movement. So I wouldn't have activated them. So I'm going to bypass them. But now the next question, next turn, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Do I, you know, get Darlon, who's I think the army of the Midi, or do I just press forward for here? Well, I think I can activate Darlon and activate him and get him at the same time. So I will probably be making a pause to give orders to Darlon in the next turn, just to give kind of a feel of, okay, how much decision making do I really have at this point with the French? Because there's not a whole hell of a lot I can do. I can withdraw here. I could move around a little here, probably. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Not quite. Yeah, I could. And this is a tough call. We'll see. Okay, so we have Beresford's forces marching up. Unlimbered some guns. Forgot to fire them. Got to take care of that. But no, I did fire them. I fired them in conjunction with the flank attack there. Stayed away from the light cav so it couldn't charge me. I'm not sure how effective it would be, but I'm always scared of cav. Especially the infantry is afraid of the cav doing a countercharge. But honestly, my cav can't charge, so yeah, that is light cav. So I gotta kind of delay a turn. I noticed I was forgetting those fatigue rules. I'll get to them in a moment, because I see some problems with them. First time I think I've done this. Maybe not. Oh, sheet. I forgot to give him his +1. So that was actually 30 to 8. Which means it was 3 to 1 instead of... So there's a casualty on here on 111 that I didn't count. I forgot the +1 for attacking in column, which is kind of the reason you do it. But I managed to disorder the French force in normal disorder marker. Now this is where the problem comes. So the way fatigue markers are supposed to go, the counters pretty much count up underneath the leader counter. Okay, we got a problem right there. Because what's underneath Hill here, because he's attacking, is his Spanish infantry. So that's going to kind of look like disorder. I don't want to confuse things. Since I'm using the orders rules, I'm going to put base fatigue here. And then over on status, I'm going to put the big fatigue. So every set of 5 goes over to here. Or maybe it's every set of 6. I don't remember. But I think it's every set of 5. Goes over to here to be an actual morale penalty. Now, why is the fatigue rule awesome? As I immediately begin to see what I think it's going to do. There's nothing in this game that causes your command to sort of stop attacking. There's no core attack stoppage in this design. The fatigue rule, though, makes it so that your core just starts degenerating the harder it pushes. Now, it only gets penalized for movement and for melee attacks, which is why we have a 3 here on Hill, because he did a melee attack. Over here on Beresford, he's moved twice, so he has 2. None of these are penalties. Yeah, once we have 5, we'll be at -1 on everything. But it really does kind of indicate a tired force is not going to be able to keep pushing. When we look at the fact that we got half-hour turns, you know, marching for 2.5 hours straight, well, if you recover, it'll take you about an hour. That seems a little excessive to me. I may want to up the recovery rate. So the recovery rate if you're just trading shots with each other, which is still, a fatiguing action, but if you're not moving and you're not firing and you're not meleeing with any of your units, the recovery rate is 1 point. The recovery rate, if you do nothing with the entire corps, you neither move nor melee nor get fired at, is 2 per turn. I'm beginning to think that I would actually like to see that upped, and I'm kind of thinking I might push that to 3 of these sort of minor points of fatigue per turn, because then then you're looking at out of any given hour, a quarter of the time is spent resting. Well, out of any given amount of time, a quarter of the time is spent resting. So hard march, a march going on is going to penalize you, and it really does seem to at least in my mind, look like that'll work a little better. I'm a little worried that the fatigue's going to add up too much, and you're not going to be able to press. You're not going to be able to conduct any real offensives here. So we'll play around with it and see how it works out. But one thing that was clear to me was I can't be putting counters underneath the leader. That's going to be too close. Now, granted, you have them diagonally here. Maybe they'd just be underneath. Also, it's not as easy to access and to view what's going on. Whether or not I put the fatigue damage, as it were, markers over here on this sheet still, or on the board itself on top of the leaders, I don't know. I kind of like leaving the leaders untrammeled when I have an order sheet to keep track of them. Alternatively, I could keep track of it on paper, but I'd probably forget that more often. The only problem with this is I kind of like the idea of being able to stack and move my sheets of paper around, and this is going to be a little harder to cope with for that. So, I don't know, maybe I'll make little holding boxes. I mean, it's not like there are a whole lot of leaders in the game. Because it's at the core level, there's what, I don't know. We got 4 leaders under the Brits, and I think only 3 for the French. As 9 a.m. comes by, felt pretty bad getting driven back that way, but now I've sent most of Hill's command running too. So you can't complain too much. I think we've kind of done our job, slowed that down. It's not going to gain a lot of ground. Over here, I've got this out of command marker to indicate these guys have not been brought into that 6 hex range, so none of them can actually move. I didn't make any cav charge. I could have. This one I've decided cannot. I'm going to follow the rules on that. It's legitimate for it to stay there. It doesn't have to try to run home or anything like that. In fact, well, it can now. But it is protecting my front there. I've moved units up out of the town into what I think, forms a sturdier line. The other option would be to have pulled back in the face of the advance. But I've got pretty good numbers here. I've got artillery up on the hill. I don't think the English are going to get much. And if I can kind of create a solid line across that front, I think they're actually going to be screwed by their orders. Of course, after a couple of turns of pursuing an attack, you can call it off. So there's not too big a deal there. Jourdan has moved up and is activating Delon, which is going to increase that French power in the center by quite a bit if he gets up there. I haven't decided what orders to write, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to give him an anchoring from the river down to the hill or so, and see whether he can hold that, and that'll allow me to shift these forces to make sure they control. Looks like it is indeed the south. There's the compass rose up there. English cav, at least the stuff that's up towards the front, is better quality than the French stuff. You can see some heavy cav there. This was light cav. It bounced, but a big unit. I had them overstacked at one point, accidentally. It bounced the French cav away, but over here it was even uglier with heavy cav hitting. And now I've got, I actually used 2 different cav units. One cav unit had to pull back because it turned these French into a square, which now I'm taking advantage of with my infantry. I'm leaving a channel open for my artillery to fire down. Extending the line down here as far as I kind of can. Over here, the Spaniards don't really feel like they have enough of an advantage. Once I set up the cannon, I think I'll chase the French away anyway. So why risk fighting them with crappier troops? And I have to roll the dice still for all the combats. I'm remembering to do approach fire with the artillery when you're 2 hexes away. You actually start, when you move from 2 to 1 hexes, you take a shot. So that's kind of cool too. A little bit of trouble with the fatigue numbers. As far as I can tell, the English didn't actually launch any melees this turn yet, but they were countercharged. If their charges were successful, those would count as melees and would rank up the fatigue. I'm kind of disturbed the fatigue. I don't know. It feels to me like cav fatigue and infantry fatigue is a little different. And the cav are kind of accounted for, but not really. They don't get blown the way they do in some games as often. But the French did a cav charge or counter charge with a couple of units. And actually 2 different commands. I thought they just did it with the weird little, shit. I'm so used to ones having 2s on the back of them, but they don't in this design. But anyway, yeah, the French are getting fatigued as well by those counter charges, which again feels a little weird. Those units are going to be resting very shortly, but in terms of reorganizing, whereas the line is going to be taking fatigue hits for maybe just trying to operate as a line. Both sides are kind of breaking apart here. You can see the French actually got a hole in their line now. And there was this is was the special case where, because this unit was in the front of an adjacent unit, it couldn't get flanking fire on this, so it's hard to catch flanking fire. So for example, this hex wouldn't give me flanking on here. This hex though would give flanking in either direction. You just have to kind of look at it basically. There's kind of this, if you can draw a contiguous line, there's a pretty good chance you're not going to have it. But this was a case where it looked kind of weird to me, but staggered the way it was, it works fine. You have a solid line. The square here took 3 hits, because they have +1 on square and a lot of fire coming in. Of course, it has no morale penalty because it's not surrounded, but it still is getting chewed up by the fire. Here's a problem, depending on what level of rules, your orders rules you're playing with. If you're playing with the base orders rules, Jordan's capability to wake people up is too low. So I'm giving a modifier and allowing him to move his full movement allowance, which is what I've been doing, until he's woken up the commanders that he's aiming to wake up. If he starts issuing orders to commanders that he hasn't woken up yet, or that he's already woken up, if he's flying around back and forth trying to command the line here and not paying attention to some commander back there, no, there's only one really, he'll only get back down to his half movement. But right now he's in kind of a panic mode and maybe not traveling with his full command staff. At least that's how I'm looking at it. Because otherwise you have a significant difference as to how quickly the French get to respond at all. So I've written myself some orders for these guys, and they will get to take them under advisement. Now, when you're playing this and you give a order, jeez, I'm trying to remember whether these units can move right away or if they have to delay a turn. And I'm looking for the case on that, and it's so hard to find stuff in here. Even though it's a small rule book, it's not there. It's like under obeying orders. Yeah. So it's an automatic success, and that is it goes the next turn. So I can't start moving the units yet, unless Yeah. The order is effective the next turn, even in the case of same hex orders, because it does take some time to propagate through the command. As we move to 9:30, the English are going to be getting some reinforcements here. I don't know whose set this is. I think it's these guys, which look like, geez, that looks like a whole separate command, so maybe I have things screwed up there. I can't. Who's blue? I don't know. Maybe I have them misordered, which would be a problem. These guys up here I can bring in. There's some Spanish rebels that come in, I don't know, somewhere up on the north of the map. I don't want to bring them in until, you know, they're going to be useful, basically. Right now they'd probably just get killed. What happened with the line? Well, the French kind of shifted over, and we're covering our hill a little better. Jordan, I either cheated by moving Gazan forward in the first place, or I was allowed to because he's within 6 hexes, and I'm allowed to move him back. So one way or another, Jordan was able to reach him, not realize him. There's some weird stuff going on because of the fatigue rules. Let me explain one thing in particular. So if it was per unit fatigue, it would work fine, except that would be hellacious in terms of tracking. But because it's per corps, and, you know, again, this is that, gee, wouldn't it be nice to have divisional structures in here somewhere? Because it's per corps, that would still be painful, but it means that, you know, if I want to do anything with my corps, move 1 unit or whatever, I end up taking a fatigue hit for that. And if I want to make one little melee attack. So what you can't do is what was historically done so very often. And I may throw these rules out because they may not be doing what I expect them to. But I think I'm going to play this scenario out, at least with them. Which is that, you know, you withdraw a brigade or you withdraw maybe a whole division and let it rest a little bit and become your reserve. While you fight on with the units that aren't so tired, and you shift units in and out of the fight. But you can't do that when you've got a whole, you know, such a major portion of your field force committed to, yeah, if even 1 unit of this moves, the whole thing's out. So you could have a reserve corps, but you can't have like a reserve division in the same sense. And I'm just not convinced that it works at all well. We'll see, because we haven't seen very much of it. Because one thing that happens is, of course, you know, as both sides are engaged, just the whole formation kind of becomes weaker overall. And maybe that's fair. Maybe it is. I don't know. Example of what the fatigue levels are almost making me do. It almost made me want to leave Cav sitting in front of some skirmishers and not position Cav to threaten the French line. I've decided those things are too important, but that's really all I wanted to move. I got a few other things I want to do, but in this case, Beresford, you know, he's getting close to that penalty. Hill's going to exceed it just by moving his reinforcements onto the board, even if he didn't move any of this stuff. Psychologically, I think the effect of this this rule is not very good, and I'm just not sure it's worth maintaining. As one more factor added into, you know, the calculations of whether a corps is going to perform any melees or not, you know, sometimes you do it anyway. Here, the Brits had to take out a cannon, which by meleeing it and costing themselves, hey, now I got a -1, you know, from now on, then I was able to, I knew it was stuck and it didn't show. I knew that it was worth making that 1 melee assault, even though it means all of these units are now at -1 morale. I'm making the null so untenable for the French that they're going to have to fall back from it. And then I can rest if I need to, you know. The defense definitely has less of a hard job. But the problem with then I can rest if I need to is I have to call my orders off. That's not a big deal because Wellington can assign orders whenever the hell he likes, pretty much. He's got 3 per turn, you know. But yeah, there's definitely a... All right, now that I've recovered, I got to get this thing moving again, kind of delayed everything. Of course, if you time it right, when something stops, immediately that's when you kind of send your order out because you'll recover enough morale by the time it's done. I was a little worried that the English command would be too weak to take the Knoll, Wellington's side there, but as you can see, the French have abandoned it. A lot of the units are really just didn't have much choice. We have D'Erlon trying to move up to take position up there. That extra weight is probably going to be a bit of a difficulty for the Brits. One thing to note here, this is not the French army of the earlier couple of battles. These guys all have 7 morale. That's not good at all. And we're still facing an English army that's as good as it was at Salamanca. So I'm not counting on the French being able to hold out terribly well under any circumstances. You see kind of a fallback, building up a solid line here, throwing some skirmishers up. That gets me a few initial shots. The Brits are going to be able to throw their own skirmishers and clear them out fairly easily, so that's not really a big deal. We had recovery here. Hill's forces, again, the French are pulling back there. But we are seeing... I may have cheated by moving these guys, but I'm not going to undo it. That's some cav coming up to support Gazan. And on the other hand, D'Erlon is in command, which means any of his units are still there. Not a lot to rally for the French on this side of the turn, but yeah, we're point-wise, French are 15 losses. Shit. That's reversed. And I'm not sure if I got it right last time. French are 15 losses, English are 10. You can see last time it was pretty close. I think in the first one I had it right. So, you know, the numbers are beginning to tell against the French. The artillery getting cleared out here, a lot of opportunity fire and everything like that. That's going to cause damage. This side here of the 10 a.m. turn. Picton's column comes in. I sent them some orders. They still have to roll on them. They're not going to be able to implement them next turn, even if they succeed in getting them. This is one place where things get different. So there's no like standing orders when pieces come on the map or anything like that. And I'm not quite sure what to do with these guys. They really do need orders. If you maybe fudged, added some concepts to the game, like, hey, you can come in with pre-started orders, to allow you to march on the map and get somewhere. I gave kind of the default, which is, hey, march towards the army command, and maybe you don't have to march behind your friendly troops. You can halt here and await orders at any point or whatever like that. So that's what I'm pretty much doing, but it is going to delay the entrance of Picton's forces. The English have done quite well this turn. And when the French fired, it looked ugly because more English units went scattering back. But boom, they've routed one. This guy's badly disordered. Over here, there's no way that the French are going to hold this. They're going to have to throw those units back. The hill, the knoll, has fallen completely. Part of that charging that ended up hitting nothing but disordered troops, but that's pretty potent actually. And one of them was only a 2-to-1 because it was a big ass stack, but now it's a routed big ass stack. It's hard to rally units though with the fatigue rolls. Now, I mean, it's not that big a deal, but the English have a -1 to their morales, so they're one worse, and those 9s that were 7s intended to recover are now 6s and are more likely not to recover than to recover. So, that's one factor in it. Of course, if you have Wellington on top, it should work, but it's still possible to fail, it seems. I'm seeing more and more of this game as sort of a different focus from the other kind of, certainly regimental, but even the Civil War Brigade Series game. This focuses a little bit more on actual maneuvers. Figuring out just where the weak spot in the enemy line is that you want to hit, what you want to do to collapse it, etc. It just feels more important to me in it. And to tell you the truth, the fatigue rules are adding a lot to it. Now I'm seeing, hey, I can't recover my army. I'm only going to have half my force, and it's going to be lower morale if I don't stop soon. And on the other hand, that may give the French a chance to get away, which they would not have in a game like the NBS series. They would be being pressed continuously there. That's an option the English have, but as they do it, and especially if I'm going to do a cav charge, boom, that's a second point of morale, fatigue that goes. Not morale, but yeah. So you really do get kind of a rationale for the pauses in battle that happen in some situations, and just a number of really interesting facets. Because honestly, this isn't a zero-sum thing. This isn't like the problem that I see in, say, Balance of Powers and some of the World War I games, and honestly, a lot of tactical games too, which is kind of I'm stronger right now, so I'll just hit you. Here, attacking is actually just too hard to do. So your assault ends up just petering out on its own. This happens in CWB and the NBS games, but it happens at a different level. It happens at the point where the forces just aren't able to move on. Now, how much difference does that really make? Maybe not that much, because it's a lot harder to recover strength points in this game. So some of this fatigue may include stragglers and all kind of stuff like that. Short-term stragglers, rather than what we normally see as just sort of a fatigue level. So there's some interesting facets to all of this to look at. But I'm definitely seeing the maneuver being more important. I am still kind of griping about the level. So for a regimental game, it seems very strange, like I said before, to have leaders at the corps level only, and then the same, because of those leaders being at that level, your orders are at that level, your fatigue is at that level, everything's at the corps level, yet it's as if we're skipping a layer in the command structure, as far as I feel. It seems to work, and the hexes cover a lot of ground, etc. So it feels, and maybe this is part of what gives it more of a maneuver feel, is it feels a lot from a much higher level than I'd expect it to be for a game that is focusing on a regimental level. Most of the exciting stuff's happening on the command and control level at this point. I made an attempt with Derlon to make an initiative roll. He failed it. That means he has a -2 morale. It's for a turn, so I'm guessing for the French movement phase and then for the British return phase. I've got that marked by putting him upside down. Hopefully I'll remember that that's what that means. We also rested with Gazan. Now I've sent him some orders. He's got withdrawal orders, and those are written down to take effect. Meanwhile, Jordan used his full movement allowance to get himself, rather than his army leader movement allowance, to get himself over to Riley so that he can start moving those forward. These guys, they're all still forced on what is essentially an offensive order. Now, they moved up, and rather than blowing this cav, I could have retreated. I should do the retreat before melee thing. Those English are low on points. Basically what I'm looking at is, hey, I'm not going to be able to do another charge, so I should get out of there. But I'm kind of worried about the morale. But I'll make the morale check. Okay, so we got to retreat him before as the French advanced there, and I got to figure out. I think I'm only allowed to go a couple of hexes back. What was going on there is the French slowed their advance, because if they moved directly onto next to that cav, it could countercharge them and bust them up. But by throwing skirmishers out, I kind of chased the cav away. It can stand or it can retreat. I chose the retreat where they make the morale check. I had to hunt that down because it's like there's multiple different retreat options for cav. One is to just blow the cav and run away. But in this case, and they're kind of weirdly worded because the optional rule seems to indicate that you can blow cav and run away, but you can't do it in every condition if you're being attacked by cav. I'm not sure there's enough English to make D'Erlon's failure be an expensive proposition. In fact, one question is how long we've kind of been engaged, because, so here's the thing. You have to continue with your orders for at least 3 turns. And if you don't do that, you can't declare them kind of, okay, that's dead. You know, you can halt an attack after 3 turns, but what exactly, when do you declare, when did that attack start from the Brits? It certainly didn't start in the first turn. But I think they were exchanging fire by the second turn. So I may be pulling the reins up on this British advance here and letting them try to recuperate a little bit. And even though I haven't achieved my success, I'd be essentially calling this a failure, which to me should cause a morale hit of some sort or another, but maybe not. I don't know. Anyway, that was the limitation there. Point-wise, continues to move forward. The French are up to 21 casualties in total, which isn't really too bad given, you know, how they kind of got hammered. They look a lot worse than they actually are. Of course, these guys would count if we were going towards, hey, did the army disrupt? Is it completely demoralized? Alrighty. It is very likely to accept their orders without delay. Picton here is moving forward. You know, D'Erlon is, of course, not getting hit by him, so he's not paying any penalty, really, for that failed initiative attempt. But now he's either got to pursue with his attack or see what happens. I chose to keep going with Beresford. I don't know how wise this is. He's, you know, kind of fatigued. The fatigue did definitely, again, prevent me from making a couple of melees I would have made in the previous scenarios that I played, simply on the, yeah, I got the odds here. Oh, yeah, but now I've got the odds and I'm willing to tire my units out a little bit more. So here I didn't pursue this disordered unit. I figure, you know, a corps being a little bit more tired is as big a deal as destroying that unit, and there's no guarantee that this is going to work out terribly well. We got additional troops from Hill coming in. Now, I screwed up last turn. I didn't bring in some reinforcements. Rather than jump start them or anything like that, they're cav. I brought them in now. It slowed up my column a little bit. Hey, you know, vagaries of war, right? So that's about where we are. And even with the ability to back out of combat that was pointed out to me, it's still not pleasant trying to get away. These guys, I just turned him and ran. Now I've got some cav screening this a little bit. That helps. The Brits could try to run and say, screw it, we'll take the cav. And, you know, that could turn into a bloody mess across the board. Alternatively, they could let the French withdraw and try to set up. But they've got some interesting shots if the cav goes away, because this is the back end of those French units. They're, you know, if the cav is ignored and they're able, and the English are able to get through it, based on their orders as well, the French could be in a lot of trouble. The problem is Picton's line is not, or column is not very big. Over here, the French are pulling out some withdrawal fire has further increased the amount of losses and units routing. And really, if the English had orders to keep going beyond Arennes at this point, the French might be in some problems. Of course, the fatigue issue is in place for both sides. Riley is going to be moving now. Jourdan is heading forward to try to figure out what he needs to do. I have no rules on when these Spanish units get released. I guess they get released at the same time as Joseph's units. They make sense. There's no commander that I could go in order or anything like that. Point-wise, the British lost one more point. French still bleeding. 5 more points from, trying to pull away out of here. And you kind of think, geez, maybe I'd been better off just standing and screw it, I was in a situation that, I couldn't really hold, but am I going to be all that much better back here after I take those losses and after, the British forces get to coordinate and all hit together? As it stands right now, I've got, some kind of chewed up units attacking me, and then Picton, who's not all that big either. But if they manage to coordinate, Hill's coming in at the same time, and there's all those. Uh-oh.